We are on part 3 of Introduction to After Effects, creating a logo animation. And we are actually going to create our second logo animation. So let me go ahead and clean up my file here. I don't need this import, delete. I don't need the solids folder, go ahead and delete that. And I think we're good to go. Let's go ahead and import the logo again. So right click, import, file. Click on the video logo and choose composition this time. Click import. And before I do anything else, let's rename this, rename. So I can keep my original, underscore trapcg comp size. Okay, so that's going to be my base. I'm going to go ahead and hit Control D on the keyboard to duplicate. Otherwise, you have to come up to Edit, Duplicate here. And let's go ahead and right click, rename. And this time I'm going to call this trapcg logo animation underscore 2. So let me double click this one to set it into the timeline. Okay, so the primary difference is that each one of these layers now is the size of the comp. As you can see here, the anchor point for all the layers is in the center, and then the selection area is the full size of the comp, no matter which layer you select on. Okay, so just to show you, go back to video 1 or logo animation 1, and you can see here when we scale these pieces up, they scaled from their center points, creating this kind of look. And if I go to this guy and select all the side logo pieces and hit S on the keyboard for scale and scale it down, you can see here it scales towards the center. Because again, each one of these is the size of the comp. So it allows us to create a different looking animation using the same tools. So let's go ahead and play around with this. I'm going to start off by hiding trapcg. Okay. And I'm going to change the anchor. So I'm going to hit A on the keyboard for anchor point, and I'm going to slide everything over to where the anchor is in the center of the logo. And then I'm going to slide it up, probably to about there. Maybe a little too high. Okay, so let's zoom in here. And this looks like it's going to be 20, I'm going to go 621.5. There we go. That's right down the center. Let me zoom out. Maybe bring it down a little bit more. Okay. So again, I've set the anchor point to all these pieces to be the center area of the logo. Now, I'm going to go ahead and click the arrow tool here. Click it again to open it up. And what I want to do is copy the anchor point settings over to the position to reset the position of the logo. All right, to do this, let's just go ahead and come in here, 621.5. And this one is going to be 511. And you can see here the logo is now back into the correct position. Let me go ahead and turn on the eyeballs again, right where it needs to be. All right. This only works on the full composition, each layer having the full size of the comp, as opposed to the individual layers. It will not work in here. So copying and pasting the anchor point data over to the position data only works in this setup. So let me go ahead and minimize this for now. So let's see here. Let's start with scale. Let's animate this on scale first. So I'm going to hit S on the keyboard, and I'm going to go all the way to frame, let's say 10. And I'm going to set the initial keyframe. So let's hit the stopwatch. So there's our initial state for all the for all the layers. So let's go ahead and slide the time slider back and type in 0. And then scrub the timeline. As you can see here, the logo scales up from the center. I think maybe it might be cooler to scale a little bit above 100% and then go back down to 100%. So let's do 110. And then let's go a couple frames over to frame 13 is probably good. Let's go 90. So 10 below. And then let's go about 4 more frames over. Yeah, that should work. 17, let's go ahead and type in 100%. So now when we play this animation, 0 on the keyboard, you can see here it scales up and scales back down. Let me go ahead and set the playback area so I don't have to play through the whole timeline. Okay, and I can do a nice little ease on the last part of this. Ease in, maybe scale it a little bit further forward. Okay, So now that that's in place, let's go ahead and offset these layers. I'm going to go ahead and set maybe a 2 or 3 frame offset. Let's go 2 frame offset and hit Alt, curly bracket. Again, that's the bracket next to the P, well actually next to the backslash. So let's close curly bracket and let's go ahead and come at right click, do keyframe assistance and go to sequence layers, click OK. Then go back to frame or the end timeline and hold down Alt, curly bracket again to extend them back out. Let's go ahead and play that animation. Let me actually pull this out. Okay, let me extend it out a little bit further. There we go. And you can see here it's created an entirely different look for just scaling. We're using the same tool that we used in the first one. Okay, so let's take a look at Trap CG this time. So let's actually apply rotation. I'm not going to actually move it because moving it would be about the same. Doesn't matter where the position point is. In this circumstance, let me minimize all these. In fact, let me just select them instead of wasting my time. There we go. Okay, so let's go ahead and select the G all the way to the T. And I'm going to hit R on the keyboard for rotate. And a 10 frame rotate will probably be good. Set the pocket watch, or sorry, the stopwatch. And go all the way back to frame 0, and I'm going to actually type in 1. So these things are going to do 1 full rotation, just like that. Now it looks odd right now, but we're going to play with this. So let's actually have these guys fade in. So I'm going to hit T on the keyboard for opacity, and I think maybe 5 frames in. Let's have it get to 100% opacity, then go back to frame 0. And slide this all the way back down to 0. So now it fades in as it's spinning around. Okay, so I'm going to hit U on the keyboard. And you can see here, here's all my keyframes. I'm going to hit U again. So I think I want to offset these guys as well, since we have them fading and rotating in. So I'm going to go ahead and let's say, in fact, actually, I want to play with the eases first. So I'm going to go U, drag select over these, all these keyframes on the back end, right click, key assistant, ease in. And I might as well ease in the fade. Actually, no, I'm going to leave the fade. Okay. So I'm going to hit U again. And let's go ahead and do the curly bracket thing. Offset these by, let's say, 2 frames. Alt, end bracket, right click, keyframe assistant, sequence layers, click OK. Go all the way to the end of the timeline, Alt, curly bracket again. There we go. And you can see here it created a completely different look. Now I'm going to offset these. So the beginning animation starts up first. Then these things come in. Yeah. Okay, so I think what we can add to this as well to help improve the look is maybe turn on motion blur. So we're going to turn it on in the editor or in the timeline, and then I'm going to apply it to these layers here. Okay, and you can see here that's motion blur when it's already applied. So let me pull this back out to maybe about there and hit 0 on the keyframe or keyboard. Now, motion blur is going to cause it to slow down for playback, and this is where we can use the decrease resolution to get this to play back faster. So I'm going to go ahead and click in the timeline, go down to quarter, and hit 0 on the keyboard. And you can see here it's a lot faster to play it back. Or to buffer it, I should say. So that is the animation. All right. So pretty simple, self-explanatory. If I wanted to, I can actually hit A on the keyboard, and let's change the anchor point to maybe the beginning of the T, just like that, and hit P on the keyboard. Well, actually we need to see position and anchor point. So again, we just need to change this 771 and 576. There we go. That looks a little bit better. Okay, so that's your second logo animation. If you want to play with motion blur, let me go ahead. Let's first save this. Okay, so let's play with the settings of the motion blur. Let me get it to a place where there's actually some motion blur. Let's go there. And let's jump over to composition, compositional settings, and go into custom. Actually, no, sorry, advanced tab here. And right here is your motion blur options. As you can see, it says motion blur. I have a shutter angle of 180, shutter phase is 0, samples per frame is 16, and adaptive sample limit is 128. So let's just bring this up. Let's say 300. You can see here it's stretching out the actual motion blur. Let me come back in, composition, compositional settings, advanced. I'm going to go 600. Let's just bring it way up. And let me go ahead and test this animation. And you can see here I'm getting a really long swoop, sorry. So that's pretty cool. And if we want, let's go ahead and play with some of those other settings just to see what they do. Composition, compositional settings. Go back to advanced and samples per frame. Let's say 40. And try this again. And it's giving us a little bit cleaner look for the actual animation. Now that you guys are getting a grasp on how this system works, let's add an effect. So we're going to come up to Window, and we're going to open up two new windows. We're going to come down to Effects and Presets right here, which is Control 5 on the keyboard. And I'm going to grab this. Oops, got to let it load first, sorry. There we go. I'm going to pull it over to the project window, and I'm going to make sure it's the second tab. Okay. Some people like to have this in a tab, maybe that's on the side. Depends on how much space you want for your composition area. So let me pull this down a little bit. And then we want to go Window, Effects, Controls. All right. And I like to have that in the same window as my effects and presets. So we can pull this over, just like that. Or again, you can have them in the project tab area. Depends on how much space you want to eat up with all these tabs. Okay, so effects and presets, I'll usually have that first, and then effects, controls. All right, so the effects and presets is where you can apply and add so many different effects to this, to any layer we want. So let's go ahead, excuse me, my chest was starting to hurt. Okay, so going with letter T, let's go ahead and add a glow effect. So we can either manually type in glow, or I believe it's under simulation. It's been a while since I've actually manually looked for these. Maybe stylize. CC glow, there it is. Okay, like I said, usually you can just type it in, but it's a good idea to start going through these to see what options you have. So I'm going to apply the glow effect to, is this the layer that's in motion right now? I think it is. So let's go ahead and drag and drop it to P. And you can see, oh, no, that's not the one. So I'm going to undo that one. It might be this one. Yeah. Effects and presets. There we go. So you can see it's applying a glow effect, and I have lots of controls in the effects and presets tab area right here. If I open up the layer as well, you can see here I have a new tab called effects. Let me open that up. Glow, and then I have these settings down here as well. So I don't have to have the tab open. You can access it through the timeline. It's up to you. I'm going to minimize this for now. So with this right next to the window where we can see when we change settings, let me open this up a little bit more. Pull this back a little bit more. Okay, so let's say the threshold. Let's bring this down. And it's going to allow the glow to spread more. All right, and let's increase the radius. And let's increase the intensity. All right, you can see that all these values are starting to change the way they interact on this. And of course, you have other options here on top, behind, how it's glowing. So right now it's set to add. I can set it to none. Multiply. Each one is going to give me a different effect. I'm going to leave it on add though. I also have how it's what kind of glow factor I'm applying. So I have an add original colors. That's going to be the color of the object, but I can actually choose A and B colors. And let's say the white color, I want an orange. Maybe we're applying an orange to this. And then the black color is going to be a blue. And you can see the effect that it's being applied. I'm going to go intensity of 4. And you can see how much it brightened it up. So let me go ahead and test this. And as you can see in its final position, I've got this crazy orange-blue glow on it. I'm going to switch it back to original colors. And that's the effect without the orange and blue. All right. Now, I'm thinking that I don't want the glow to actually happen during the entire length of the animation. I just want it during the movement, not actually when it's stopped. Okay, so I'm going to go to where it stops. Let's go ahead and hit U on the keyboard. So that's where the final rotation position is. And I'm going to go ahead and set my keyframes for right now for the threshold, radius, and intensity. And I'm going to hit U on the keyboard so I can see that keyframe. So here's, or these 3 keyframes, and I'm going to bring these back a couple frames, maybe to there. And then I'm going to dial these guys down to 0. Radius 0, intensity 0, and threshold. That's probably good. Now let's just bring it down to 0. All right, so now you'll see that the glow will kind of come to an end in its last position. And I'm thinking maybe a frame before would be better. And let's pull this back a little bit more. There we go. That's much better. Okay. And of course I can keep playing with these. I can add a ease in. And I'm thinking, let's play with the radius real quick. I'm going to bring the radius down. 50 looks like a good, maybe 60 was a good setup. Let me increase the threshold. No, definitely don't want an increase. I'm going to set the threshold down to 0. Yeah, I think that works. Now orange is not really working, so I'm going to go in here and maybe just do a green. Yeah, I think that looks better. Okay, so once I'm happy with this effect, I can actually paste it to each of the layers. I'm not stuck with the one layer. So let's go ahead and with the glow effect activated, in fact, I can come in here, click on glow, hit Control C, or right click and say, oh, I guess I can't right click and copy. So you do have to sit there and click on it, Control C. You might be able to come up to here, copy, there we go. So copy. And then you can actually paste this to multiple frames. However, it's going to paste the animation from the start point of the timeline, the time sliders. So to show you this, I'm going to go ahead and click on the next one, hit Control V, and I'm going to hit U. And you can see here where the time slider was, where it began the animation. All right. So let me go ahead and drag these back to, looks like it needs to be there. Actually, no, it's one frame behind the last keyframe. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and hit U again, close these out. I'm going to hit U on this one, and I'm going to go to about here and hit Control V. And it's almost in the right spot, so I'm going to hit U, select them, and drag them over one. So sometimes it's best to do this effect before you offset your layers, but like I'm showing you, you don't have to. And I think that's correct position. Yep. Just to make sure okay, we're good, we're good. So my first one is a glow, my second one has a glow, my third one has a glow, fourth one has a glow. Need to apply one to here. And we're good. And last but not least, probably about there. And let me go U. I think these need to go over one more. Yep, there we go. All right, so let's just take a look at the animation now. 0 on the keyboard. So that's pretty cool. So now you've learned how to add an actual effect. Now that, like I said, there's tons of effects in here. Let me go ahead and minimize that. Let's see what else can we apply to this. There's lots of stuff we can actually apply. It all depends on what you want to do. I'm going to actually turn off the motion blur for right now. All right. So that way, if I play this, you'll see that it's just solid letters spinning in with their little glows. But maybe let's try adding what I call vector blur. So I'm going to type in vector, and here it is, CC vector blur. And I'm going to apply this to the P again, just because it moves a lot. Okay, so with this selected, I'm going to double click, and let's just dial it up. So you can see here it's adding to the stack. So let me minimize this. So this is the new one. I'm going to go amount, and maybe angle offset, and smoothness. I'm going to bring that all the way down to 0. And you can see here it's changing the shape. Let me go back to full for the render output. And that's what the vector effect has created. Now if I click this little FX sign here, it turns it off. So let me bring down the amount. That's a negative value. Let's go really high. Oops, too high positive value. Don't want to go too far. You can see here it's creating various different looks for the P. Apply some smoothness. So that's another effect. I don't like it, so I'm going to go ahead and delete it. All right, so what other things can we play around with? I mean, there's just tons of various different effects. You've got generate a beam effect, which is like the Star Wars lightsaber effect can be created with the beam effect. It takes a little bit to play with though, so it's not automatically do it for you. Let's see, radio waves. It creates like radio waves bouncing off of things. It's useless in this case. There's a lens flare effect if we wanted to. Just to show you this, let me double click, but it's going to take away, it's going to kind of apply this, whoops, Control Z, and let me go to the center point. It's being applied to the layer only, as you can see. I'm going to go ahead and delete that. So there's a lot of different presets in here. I can add a cell pattern to the object. I can even put the cell pattern above the glow. It's going to get me a slightly different look. All right, so there's lots of options in here when you're playing with the effects. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this off. So I like the blur effect. I like the way we had it before. So let me just turn all these back on. Let's see here, all the way to G. And I think we're good to go. So again, just like before, I would choose my kind of the endpoint for my animation. So maybe 3 seconds would be long enough. So I'm going to slide this all the way over to 3. I'm going to go composition, compositional settings. I will set this one to 3. Click OK. And is there anything else I need to apply? Let me pull this up a little bit. I think that's it. So let's go ahead and go back to composition, add to render queue. You can see here adds to the list. I don't need this one. This is what we rendered out in part 1. So I'm going to hit delete on that one. And I'm going to choose the format options. And like before, it all depends on what you're trying to do. If you're trying to send it to another program to just incorporate this as a bug or some kind of animation on top of another animation, you'll probably want to render it out as a PNG sequence instead of an actual movie clip, which right here, this is the PNG sequence, or you can do a Photoshop sequence. I mean, there's lots of options in here. I just really like the PNG sequence options. Let's go ahead and do QuickTime. Let's see, format options. I will add the alpha channel. So I'm going to say it's a PNG format. And codecs options, I'm good with the no interlacing. I don't want interlacing on it. Best video quality, click OK. Come to the RGB. I want RGB plus alpha. So it goes a million to the colors of plus. That way I do have the alpha channel being saved. Click OK. And go to the output. And let's see here in final renders, I'm already in the logo animation final renders. So I'm just going to click on the first one and change the name to 2. Save. And click render. And like I said before, in older versions of After Effects, if you don't want to see the playback happening and you want to slow it down, just hit caps lock on the keyboard. In the newer versions, you don't really have that option, so you just kind of deal with what it's doing. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the animation now and let it finish its job. So it finished rendering. Let's go ahead and import it. File, import, and let's go over to logo animations, final renders, and logo 2. Footage is fine. I'm going to drag and drop it into this timeline here. It's a top layer, and let me go ahead and just turn off everything else. So I just have the top layer. Let's go ahead and preview it. I'm doing it this way because my QuickTime keeps crashing the recording program. So I'm playing it back in After Effects. So there's the logo animation. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and stop it here. I know this makes for a short tutorial, but part 4, we're going to go ahead and create one more logo animation, but we're also going to do some compositing. So we're going to create a background for it. We're actually going to mix and match two types of compositions. So we're going to do a little bit more to get you a little bit more in depth into After Effects, and that should conclude the Introduction to After Effects tutorial series.